Hi, I'm Gill Holden, Principal Officer of the Early Childhood Unit here at the National Children's Bureau. As we approach the end of the summer term and the end of what's been another incredibly challenging year for everybody, today we're going to be talking about the mental health and wellbeing of you, the professionals working every day with babies and young children. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Sonia Mainstone-Cotton, an independent early years consultant who specialises in this area. So Sonia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for asking me. It's great.
Excellent. To get us started, Sonia, would you mind just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your role?
Yeah, so I'm based in Bath. I live in Bath and North East Somerset. And my job title, I do a few things, but one of the things I do is I'm a nurture consultant working with children with social, emotional and mental health needs. So 4-year-olds in their reception class. I pick them up in the last term of their nursery and then work with them throughout their first year in school. And I work for a really specialised team in Bath called Brighter Futures. And alongside doing that, I write books and I deliver training. So I do a mix of things, but my work in school, so I'm with children about 4 days a week.
Brilliant, thank you. That sounds an incredibly interesting role. So can you tell me a little bit about the sort of mental health and wellbeing challenges you've been supporting providers with over the recent months?
Yeah, I can. So because we work with children with social, emotional, mental health needs, and those children will be in reception classes. So it will be, children in your average reception class. Obviously, the pandemic has increased, I think, those difficulties for children. And although I'll be working with one particular child, I'm there to support actually the staff and the class for the whole year. So I'm in a really unique position in that I'm able to build up a really good relationship with the staff that I work with. And I often have schools that I go back to. So I've got schools that I've worked with for 7-8 years. And certainly so my role is to support them and helping them think about what's going on for the children, what's happening for them, but actually the impact that has on them, on the staff as well. So although I'm there initially to work with the child, actually in practice I'm there to work with the adults just as much as I am with the children. And so part of my work is regularly checking in with the staff and going, are you okay? How are you? And what have I seen? If I'm honest, I'm more concerned about staff this year than I was last year, which I didn't expect to say. I'm seeing more burnout from staff. I'm seeing more staff saying, actually, I don't want to continue in this profession anymore. I'm finding it too difficult. I'm going to change. And so getting out of teaching and getting out of early years. And I think that's for a number of reasons, but I think one of the reasons is they're feeling overwhelmed. I think I have more of a sense of staff feeling overwhelmed. And I think the word I would use for the year for both staff and children is anxiety. And that's very difficult, I think, particularly if you're someone who doesn't generally feel anxious, they're aware that it's been creeping up and creeping up. And so generally there's that. And if staff aren't saying they're feeling anxious, I'm having staff just going, I am so tired. I am just exhausted.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for outlining those. And I think that's why this vodcast is so timely. I think that we can hopefully help and support. We want to retain those people in early years. We don't want to lose this incredibly skillful and professional bank of staff that we have within the early years. So if we can do something today to be able to help and support that, then I think we're on the right tracks. So can you tell me a little bit about why you think it's important that we talk about our own mental health and well-being?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the conversation about mental health and well-being has definitely increased over the years, and certainly post-COVID, I think that's really brought it to the highlight for everybody. I think one of the reasons we need to talk about it is recognizing that we all have mental health, and for us it will vary. It'll be, for some days our mental health will be good and for other days it won't be good. It'll be more of a challenge. So it's being able to recognize that and talk about that. Thankfully, I think mental health doesn't have the taboo that it used to have. However, I think for some people, they still feel that it's a failing of theirs, and it isn't. It absolutely isn't. In the way, if you'd fallen and broken your leg, you wouldn't feel like that was a failure. If you're struggling with your mental health, that isn't a failure. So I think it's important that we recognise that and talk about it. I think also through the talking of it, it's a way of recognising that this happens to everybody. This isn't just you. It's also a way of being able to then be able to find support and find ways that might help you. And obviously for some people, we need to be going down that route of seeking medical support. You know, it may be that actually recognising I really need to get some medical help here. And for others, it may be recognising I'm not at that stage, but you know what, I need to do something because I'm not feeling great and I need to make a change here. And I think that probably goes for all of us, actually. You know, I think I have pretty good mental health. I work really hard on my mental health, and I share ideas like that with the staff I work with. But that takes time. I need to take some responsibility about how do I look after me. And I think the other thing within the caring professions is we often think our job is to care for others and we care for ourselves last. And I've always said, actually, we need to turn that around. Yes, we care for others, but unless we're caring for ourselves, we can't take care of others. And I really firmly believe that. So I did a lot of work around children's wellbeing. But I know if I turn up at a class and the teacher is having a really low, hard day and they're really struggling, that class is going to be a really challenging class that day, because the children pick up on where the adults are at. And so we need to be really aware of that. And then that's why it's important that we take care of ourselves and look after ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that raising the awareness about mental health and about looking after our own mental health is so vital. And like you say, moving away from the days of when talking about mental health was a taboo subject. So yeah. OK, so many of our early years staff are on a day-to-day basis dealing with challenging situations. So how can you support them to look after their own well-being whilst they support the needs of children and families? Have you got some top tips for us here?
Yeah, so I think one important area to really look at is how do we deal with stress? Because we all have stress and we all deal with stress with we all experience stress every day. And for some of us, stress, we all need some stress in our lives. It's not all negative. And it's about how do we deal with that? How do we let it go? There's some really interesting research about ways in which we need to release stress from our bodies. But before we release it, we need to understand what stress does to us. So I often encourage practitioners to think about how does your body tell you that you're stressed? Because our bodies are amazing and they tell us when things are going wrong, but we're not always very good at tuning in and hearing that. So how does your body tell you when you're stressed? So for me, my body tells me I'm stressed when my shoulders become really tight and I get headaches. If it gets to a migraine, it's gone too far. So that's my real warning signals. So the first thing I would say is really tune into what are your warning signals. And then you need to do some things to release that stress. There's a brilliant book by some twins called, their surname is Nagoski, and they've got a book called Burnout, and they talk about releasing stress. And some of the strategies they give are you could spend 10 minutes outside, and they talk about having a list of things, a bit like a menu of ideas, and pick what is it you need today from that menu. So one thing could be go outside for 10 minutes. 10 minutes alone is recognised to be enough to release some of those stress hormones. It could be doing some exercise. It could be connecting with friends. Do you have somebody you can talk to? It could be having a really good laugh or having a really good cry. It could be doing something creative. So there are a whole load of different ideas there, and it's about today, what do I need? So today I had quite a stressful day. I've had quite some stressful conversations and some stressful experiences this morning in my day-to-day work. I spent some time outside, and that helps me to just let go. The reason I like the menu idea is I think it's really helpful for staff when you're in that moment, it'd be quite hard to think, I don't know what to do. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so tired. Whereas if you've got a menu idea in your head, you can go, okay, I could do this. And it could just be, actually, do you know what? I'm going to sit down and have a cup of tea. I'm going to get home from work. I'm not going to jump into the next thing. I'm going to sit, I'm going to have a cup of tea. I'm going to sit in the garden, whatever it is, and I'm going to bring that stress levels down. I'm not saying that's going to fix everything, but what it is going to do is that it's that moment of self-care. And that's what we need to think about more. I think it's less of the seeing well-being and self-care as being well, I'm going on holiday for 2 weeks in a month's time, that will be fine. That will be good, but that's not going to help you now. What can you do in the now? So it's working out as well, what is it that brings you moments of joy? So as well as those stresses, what brings you moments of joy in your life, and what can you do to bring those into your life regularly? So for me, a big moment of joy is swimming. I love swimming. I swim every day. That's really important for me for the exercise. But what I adore is cold water swimming. I love it. I'm a cold water swimmer all year round. That brings me moments of joy. And when I'm really stressed, I can then call on those memories. So those times that I've been in freezing cold water in Scotland or wherever, I can call on those memories, and they're going to bring up those moments of joy for me and really help me to come down, relieve some stress moments. So thinking of things like that.
That's brilliant. I love the idea of a pick and mix menu. I've got visions now of notice boards all over schools and early years settings with it. Where's your pick and mix menu for for what you're doing to look after yourself? I love that, and I love the idea of moments of joy. I think for me, if just thinking off the top of my head, some of my moments of joy are sitting in forests in Scotland, just the peace and the birds. So yeah, love that. Thank you very much for sharing that. So thinking about also our leaders and our managers, how can you encourage them to look after their well-being? And do you have any top tips on how best they can also in turn support their staff?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think it's really important that that managers model. I really believe in that. I think as managers, so when I'm in there as an advisor with those teachers that I'm working with, I'm in there as an advisory role. And when I'm asking them about what they're doing to look after themselves, I'm modelling to them about what I'm doing. So I'll talk about the swim that I had on the weekend, or the kind of things that I'm doing. And I think managers can do that too. So it's that managers need to model, and some of that modelling is by working appropriate hours. Checking in with your staff is so important. How are you? In supervisions, asking that first question, how are you today? How has it been? Remembering important things. So I have an amazing line manager. She remembers things about what's happened, maybe personal stuff if she knows that somebody's been ill. How was that? Just remembering details about staff. That doesn't need to be in a big way, but in those small moments, what the message you're giving them the message you're giving to them is, I value you. This isn't just about you're working for me and you're doing a job for me. I value you as a person. All of those sorts of things. Actually, that's about valuing staff, but it's also about things like being realistic about the hours that you're expecting them to work, all of those sorts of things. Do you provide them with decent lunch breaks, all those sorts of things? All of those are important. Do they have a staff room where they can go and have some time away from the children? That's vital. Have you got teas and coffees and drinks around? All those sorts of things. But also having conversations. Is staff wellbeing on your team meeting agenda? Is it something that you regularly talk about?
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I love that. And the bit about modelling behaviour brings me on to what I was going to ask you next, which is also what sort of behaviours can early years staff model that will in turn help children support their mental health and well-being?
So for me, the big thing is about embedding emotion language. I think that's vital. I think that's really vital for children's well-being, but also for staff well-being. So recognising and understanding and naming it. So if you're feeling a bit sad, saying in an appropriate way, obviously, but recognising and naming that and saying, oh, do you know what? I'm feeling a bit sad today because whatever it is, or I'm feeling really happy. I've had a really good time on the weekend and I'm feeling really happy, all those sorts of things. So embedding that emotion language, I think, is really important. In that, make sure that you have a really good emotional vocabulary. You know, if that's something you need work on, go and look at Brené Brown's work. She's got loads of stuff around emotional vocabulary. But also, talking to children about, as well as those emotions, talking to children about looking after yourself, talking to children about self-care, doing things like mindfulness and yoga with children and joining in with them and doing it with them and talking about how that's helping their mental health, your mental health. Another really good one is being outside. I mean, for me, outside is so important, and talking to children about that and being outside and how that's really good for them and boosting their well-being.
Brilliant, thank you. Lots of really great tips there as well. So we're approaching the time of year when many early years staff will be taking a holiday. What sort of things can they do to look after their mental health and well-being during their downtime, and how can that support them to develop ongoing habits which support mental health and well-being?
So I think the really big thing, if you are fortunate enough to be term time and have a break or be going on holiday, make sure you rest. Rest is really, really important. We need to be bringing rest into our lives throughout the week, but when you have a holiday, make sure you rest. And rest doesn't necessarily mean stopping and doing nothing. Rest means doing something that's different. Something that is different from your normal everyday work. So for me, I'm going to be going on holiday to Scotland. I will be swimming in many different freezing cold places. For me, that's restful, it's joyful, it's a complete break. And I'll be reading lots of books. I'll be reading novels and whatever else. I won't be reading work stuff. That's my time to really recoup. So know what it is that helps you to switch off and to recuperate. Really, again, it's about knowing your body, knowing what works for you, having a little list. Sometimes it can be really helpful. Write a list of things. This is what helps me. Going swimming, going for a walk, reading a book, whatever it is, write that little list as a reminder, but make sure you rest.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, definitely. And I think there is this tendency to think rest just means sitting doing nothing. And I think when you've got a sector of people who are busy all of the time doing things, it's okay to say it's okay to be busy doing something different.
Yeah.
And that classes as resting. So yeah, absolutely. Have you got any other top tips or anything else you'd like to share with the sector before we finish?
I think the really big thing is be kind to yourself. I think often we can be our own harshest critics, and I think the subject of well-being, sometimes we can go down a bit of a rabbit hole loop of, oh, I'm not being very kind to myself, and I'm not doing this well. Do you know what? Be gentle to yourself. Speak to yourself as if you were speaking to your best friend. And if your best friend was saying to you, I'm so tired, I'm worn out, what would you say to them? And sometimes it can be helpful to maybe write a letter. If that's an area that you're struggling with, write a letter to yourself as if you were writing to your best friend, and give yourself some tips. So be kind to yourself and do something that brings you joy. Know what brings you joy and do it. That's not going to solve everything, but it's going to give you a moment that will help you.
Oh, Sonia, thank you so much. I feel like this has been a moment of joy in talking to you, and I feel like it's refilled my well-being cup as well. So thank you so much for your time today. Really, really do appreciate it. And I really hope you enjoy the cold water swimming up in Scotland.
Oh, we will.
Thanks ever so much.
Okay, thank you.